seems to be that you all depend on the recordings. Thank you. Could you staple them for me? Because I'll lose it. I'll lose somebody. Oh, that's not nice. Make sure there's a name on every. That doesn't matter. Just staple it. If there's no name on it, they just don't get points.
It is a name. It's right here.
Okay. So, photosynthesis is happening in a chloroplast. It's over there. There's like 5 of them. Happening in the chloroplast. It has chloroplast has these thylakoids, which are stacked into grana. These are membranes, endomembrane systems, like endoplasmic reticulum, like the mitochondria has. Within this chloroplast, there are these pigments. There are several pigments. Each of them absorbs at different frequencies. We discussed this and showed you that yesterday on the PowerPoint. There's chlorophyll. Chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and then there's the keratins. And there's beta carotene, and there are other pigments involved as well. So the key here is that for the most part on this planet, light is absorbed, and each pigment absorbs at different frequencies. But what you'll get is at the lowest absorption, happens at green. Yeah, no, they don't, but that's okay. I'm moving on. Leave it alone. I don't care. Thank you. Appreciate it. So when we're talking about why are plants green, most plants are green because that's the color that is not absorbed. Counting your money now is not only a logistical mistake because people will know that you have money and therefore you are become a target. And secondly, this is a class and we're taking notes, so I just suggest that you pay attention to this. In any case, the first thing that happens is light's going to come in, and there's water. Water's brought up via the roots through transpiration. So I'm going to put the process that's happening here, transpirations first.
Can you zoom in a little bit more?
Then that? For what?
On that side.
To draw the chloroplast, or?
No, I just think it's too little on the other side. I can't see this.
You're going to read the chapter. Hopefully you'll read the chapter, and the chapter is much more detailed. And you have to answer a series of questions by 11:59 p.m. tonight, that's my understanding. So those questions are much more detailed than what I'm sketching out here. This is just an outline of what it is. Yeah, it would be a good idea. See, what I would like you guys to do is to take Cornell notes. And what that means is, and I know that some of you are like, I have all kinds of ideas. I don't know why you have these ideas. But what you should have is the paper divided. There should be space. So you can write down this outline of notes here in class. And then when you go home and read, right, what are you going to do? Those of you that understand the process, what would you do? Yeah.
Rewrite, revise.
Exactly. You would rewrite, revise, and add to your notes the details that you're missing. So that's what the hope would be, that you develop your skills to that point so that when you're in college, you can do the same thing. You're going to miss things while you're taking notes in college, right? And so the idea is that you would write it all down as quickly as you can, as much of it as you can in class, giving yourself as much space. That's why typing out notes doesn't work, by the way. Bullet pointing notes just don't work. You can't draw out the drawings. You can't add the annotations. And it's hard for you to give yourself the space that's necessary to get those notes written down. That's why that process does not work. But some of you are going to have to learn the hard way. Do your own thing. Bullet points don't work. You will not get the big concept. You will be stuck when you go out of order, when you mix units as if life comes at you in units, right? When you mix units, when you get an FR cube that has 5 or 6 different components to it, now you're all lost, right? You have no idea what to do. It's confusing. You're wrong. I don't understand. So I'm not even arguing with you. I'm just stating facts. You guys have to figure out your own lives. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you the facts. And some of you are going to do your own thing. You're going to refuse to listen. You do what I can't. That's all I hear it all day. I can't. That's fine. Good luck to you. All right? I'm just telling you the facts. This doesn't work. Bullet pointing information that people are telling you on a piece of paper, whether handwritten or typed, does not work. You can memorize it. That's great. And some of the times it will work. On some questions it will work. But there will come a point where that system just will fail. You must integrate the knowledge. You have to draw drawings. You have to be able to interpret graphs. You have to be able to revise. It must be done. If you don't, you will not be successful. I'm not going to say it I can't say it any more clearly. This is not an AP psychology class or AP sociology class where things are pretty straightforward. You memorize kind of like how a general theme, and then you can apply it on a particular problem or question, right? I mean, that's a little more straightforward. These are problems that are coming to you from nature, from reality, from the real world. And because of that, they're complicated, integrated, and not bullet pointable. If that's any other way I can say that again, please let me know. So yeah, that would be the idea. Transpiration, that's how the water gets up. We talked about that, osmosis, the water potential being more negative in the plant than outside, making the water go into the roots. That water, via hydrogen bonding, gets pulled up. The water leaving the leaves makes the top of the tree or plant ridiculously negative water potential because the water's leaving the plant, making a vacuum. Water gets them moved up, and that's called transpiration. Yeah. All right. So light comes into the leaf and then into the chloroplast. The chloroplast, using the stacked thylakoids, captures as much light. In photosystem 1, I always think of it as 1. Photosystem 2, which should be 1, but it isn't. In photosystem 2, what happens is that water gets broken up. H2O gets broken up into oxygen. So what they like to do is put 1/2 oxygen gas, which is one single O. I hope you understand 1/2 of 2 is 1. Plus 2 hydrogens. Plus 2 electrons. That's what happens in photosystem 2. These electrons are then raised. Their energy is raised. They have become high energy. They get transported by transporters, and you can, again, as you go through the details in your chapter reading and answering the questions that you've been asked to answer, they get passed from one to the other, across a membrane. This is all happening inside a membrane. And one of the reasons I spent so much time on membranes, remembering the membrane is hydrophobic in the center, and it has these transmembrane proteins that act as hydrogen ion pumps that are going to use energy to move electrons move these electrons, not electrons, excuse me, hydrogen ions from low to high, meaning active transport. Now, it's interesting that ATP is not used here. So there is energy being used, but it's not ATP energy, which is usually the energy is used in active transport. Here, it's the energy in the electrons that's being used, and that's moving the hydrogen ions. I should just make it a different color just for... Hydrogen ions are going to be moved across the membrane every time they slip. They go one way. They're in here. They're trapped in here. They're trapped. So now you have this high concentration of hydrogen ions, very acidic. Over here you have low. Where are the hydrogen ions coming from? Water. What happens to the water, the oxygen from water? What happens to this oxygen gas once you get two water molecules coming through? What happens to it? That oxygen gas leaves it. Well, it leaves the chloroplast. It could be used by the mitochondria, but plants do so much of this because I'll say it again. I said it before, I'll say it again. Plants are using sugar not just for energy, but also to build themselves. Their whole bodies are made of sugar. You're sitting on their bodies. You're sitting on dead plant bodies right now. And that's sugar, made of sugar. So they have to do a lot of this. They produce a lot of oxygen. The excess oxygen leaves the cell, leaves the leaf out into the atmosphere. We breathe it in. We use that. But the mitochondria use some of this as well. So this leaves the chloroplast. Now this is oxygen gas, so that means two waters were required to do this. So you should be thinking about that. See, electrons get passed over from one. This is an electron transport chain. Electron transport chain is not in a mitochondria. This one happens to be in a chloroplast. It's a chain of proteins that transport electrons. Electron transport chain. There's all kinds of names, all kinds of little intermediates. You'll learn them as you read the chapter. Then ultimately, the electron loses its energy. It's low energy. Does anybody know where it goes next? Does anybody know after it's lost all its energy, as low as it could be? That's right. Excellent. So the next thing it's going to do is it's going to go to photosystem 1. It's backwards. I don't know why. It's likely they discovered 1 before they discovered 2. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It goes to photosystem 1, where the photosystem again captures another photon, still in the membrane. It allows these electrons to the electrons. It's not taking any more electrons. It's using the same electrons that got ripped off. Water. Then those electrons get passed from place to place until finally the last electron acceptor. What was the last electron acceptor in the mitochondria? No. The last electron acceptor in the electron transport chain in mitochondria. Oxygen. To form water. Right? What was then the first thing? So the oxygen, the electrons from oxygen went and made water. Then that water was then taken, and those electrons were done what? What were done to those electrons? They got ripped off of water. They got put on oxygen to make water, right? And then those electrons were taken off of water, now used to make ATP. You see the cycle? Yeah. That's the question. What's the last electron acceptor? It got the energy here. Now you have two high energy electrons. You got your high energy electrons. There's 2 of them. Does anybody know what their high energy? What is the last electron acceptor? What's going to take those high energy? Where are those electrons going? Yes, it is. It is NAD, NADPH. It's NADP plus, but, huh? The NAD plus takes the electrons and becomes NADPH. Right. So this is an electron, and just like in NADH in cellular respirations, this is an electron carrier.
So both the last receptor and electron carrier?
Say what? Huh?
So it's both the last receptor and electron carrier?
Yep. It's the last electron acceptor in the chain, and it's the carrier. It's going to carry the electron somewhere. We'll look at them in a minute. So now NADPH has all this energy that it captured from the second photon. Now, we did all this. We created this high energy, this high concentration, or I shouldn't say we. Plants did all this to create this high concentration of high concentration of hydrogen ions, not just so that they can make NADPH. They have all these hydrogen ions in here. That's a lot of hydrogen ions. It's a big potential. We talked about ion potential. We talked about electric potential as being a big battery. So now you got this big battery. That's not all it's going to be able to do. Now you created this giant charge of hydrogen ions. You can create now, because of that, you can use that using another enzyme, another membrane protein that actually has a big hole in it. I'm just going to draw it with a big hole. And this is called ATP synthase. I think it's synthetase, but is this a synthase? Synthase.
Okay, so yesterday on that picture, that was that purple thing.
That was that purple thing. That's right. Now you got this hydrogen ion concept. There's a lot of it. Now it's what is it going to do? What are these hydrogen ions going to do? They're going to go right through. They're going to go from high to low. No problem. As they flow through, they turn, and what happens is that ADP turns into ATP. Phosphate plus ADP gets turned to ATP. That's why we call it ATP synthetase. Those hydrogen ions get recycled, and that continues on and on and on and on as long as there's light. These are what are called the light-dependent reactions. Light-dependent reactions. So any product in here, what are the products? I'm going to go ahead and highlight the products for you. So the products would be NADPH. The one product is NADPH. Another product is ATP. That's a product, right? ATP and NADPH are the two products from the light reactions. What are some of the reactants? One reactant is water, right? Water is a reactant. Oh, don't forget, oxygen is a product. What's another reactant? Water and what? ADP is used up. NADP, right?
So will phosphate be one too? Or no?
Absolutely. Very good point. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. So that's exactly right. I love your thinking. So NADP is a reactant, is used up. Phosphate is used up. So when they ask you a question on an AP exam, likely the question they'll ask you, if there's no light, what are these called?
Light dependent.
Light dependent. If there's no light, will there be more or less phosphate in ADP? More. If there's no light, there'll be more ADP, more phosphate. If there's no light, will there be more or less water? More water, because water is being broken down when there's light. And when there's no light, will there be more or less oxygen? More. When there's no light, when there's no light, will there be more or less oxygen? No light. Oxygen is a product. Oxygen is a product of the light-dependent reactions. It's yellow, not red on the board. It's a product of the light-dependent reactions. If there's no light, I'll say it again. There are two things in here. There's red things that are reactants, right? They're being used up. Are we clear? Used up means they're reactants. Yes? Yes. Yellow are products. They're being made by what? Light dependent reactions. If there's no light, will there be products? No, because the reactions won't happen because they're dependent on light. So oxygen will be made less. There'll be less oxygen made, less NADPH made, less ATP made. The reactants, there'll be more of them because less are going to be used. I hope that makes sense. Yes?
So initially, the high hydrogen ion concentration is inside of the hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Then when they're making ATP, it flows outside of the molecule into the stoma.
That's correct. They flow out of this place where there's high, and they go to low. And that's outside in the stroma, yeah. And then that turns to ATP synthase, and that makes ATP. So then out here as well, still in the chloroplast, but out here, there are some light independent reactions. They're also known as the Calvin cycle. Calvin cycle is pretty much the light independent reactions. And the whole point of the Calvin cycle, I'm just going to draw a circle. Again, you'll see the details when you do the reading. But the whole point is to make a 3-carbon sugar. Then 2 of these times 2 equals glucose. But you don't have to use it to make glucose. You can take that 3-carbon sugar, also known as it's related to glycerol, glyceraldehyde. You can make a triglyceride. You can make fats, right? So these plants make all kinds of things with this stuff. But the key is they're capturing carbon. Remember, carbon is the atom that's in all organic life forms on this planet. All our biomolecules are based in carbon. Plants make all these things for us. They take the nitrogen from the soil. They take the phosphates, the magnesium. They take the carbon from the air, and they make all these things like that we call proteins, fats, nucleic acids, and sugars, carbohydrates. They make it for us, and we eat them. That's what we call food. So they cycle round and round. The first and most important enzyme on the planet, the primary enzyme on the planet, is this enzyme called rubisco. Rubisco has an interesting story. Plants, let's be clear, photosynthesis evolved as a process, evolved in a time of low oxygen and high CO2. Low concentration of oxygen and high concentration of CO2. So that's an important fact. As we looked at protein synthesis, as we looked at genes being selected for transcription and translation, what this rubisco molecule was being transcribed and translated before there were animals on the planet. The rubisco is a very old enzyme, very conserved. It does something that's very unique, obviously difficult to do since even bacteria have rubisco. So it's something that life has not been able to replicate very easily. There aren't various kinds, so it's something that's very conserved. Rubisco takes and captures CO2. That's what gets the carbon into the cycle. Without rubisco, you don't have CO2. You don't have carbon for the cycle. You can't make glucose. You can't make fructose. You can't make fats. You can't make biomolecules because you can't capture the CO2. Another word for captures is fix. It fixes CO2. Now, there's something that unfortunately is a result, fortunately or unfortunately, is a result of how rubisco came into being. It evolved during a time of low oxygen, so it never was an issue in the first millions of years it existed. It wasn't an issue that rubisco in high heat or high concentrations of oxygen prefers oxygen. Rubisco will capture oxygen instead of CO2 when it's really hot or when there's a lot of oxygen. It just prefers oxygen. Rubisco's okay, it's pretty good at capturing CO2 when there's low oxygen and temperatures are not extremely hot. When it captures oxygen, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time. When it captures oxygen, it's called because of light, respiration. It does not use up energy, doesn't produce energy. It's time wasted. The more photorespiration you have, the more photorespiration, the less sugar, the less carbohydrates are produced. Photorespiration can reduce photosynthesis by as much as 50%. By 50%, that means the plant dies. That doesn't work. That's not affordable. Plants cannot afford to do photorespiration. In the north, up here in the north, before global climate change, photorespiration was not that big a deal because it was never really got that hot. On bad days, and so you went, 50% photorespiration on a really hot day, that's fine, maybe a few days, maybe a week at a time. It's not going to kill the plant. But you're doing photorespiration, think about places like the desert. Think about places like the Caribbean islands that the average temperature is 80 degrees. It's not unusual for the temperature to get 90s into the 90s during the day. Think about the rainforest where 90 degrees is 80 plus degrees is average. Yeah.
So when you say photosynthesis, is like the GE, like the product
A product of photosynthesis is decreased, but photosynthesis decreases. So let's talk about that. That's a good point. What do I mean by decrease in photo? Well, look. So what is coming to this cycle? You can tell me what's coming to this cycle. These two reactions are linked, right? What is coming to this Calvin cycle, to these light independent reactions? What's coming to it? That's right. ATP and NADPH from the light reactions is coming in here. We'll look at where when you read your chapter. So that's coming in here. ATP and NADPH is coming here. Where's that coming from? And of course, out comes what? I hope you see out comes what? What's going to come out? NADP and ADP plus phosphate, right? And of course the carbon. We're good? That's what's going to come out. Where's this ADP, phosphate, and NADP plus? Where's that all going? Rennie, where's all that going? Yeah, I figured I'd need to. So ADP and phosphate and NADP plus is going where? Now, where's it going? It's leaving the Calvin cycle, leaving the independent reactions happening inside the chloroplast, and going where? Right? Going back to where? So ATP synthase, the phosphate, NAD plus, ADP is going back to the light reactions, the light-dependent reactions. Correct? So if rubisco is not capturing CO2, if this is not turning, you're not using up ATP. You're not using up, in other words, you're stopping this from occurring. Correct? 50%. Do you hear what I'm saying? 50%. If you're slowing this down by 50%, that means half the ATP is being used up, half the NADPH is being used up, which means you have half the ADP, half the phosphate, half the NAD plus, because you got what you got. There's a limited amount. Is that clear? There's only a limited amount of these molecules in this chloroplast. So if you have half this amount, what happens to the light reactions? If you stop the dark reaction, the independent reactions, what happens to the dependent reactions? They stop by equal amount. So you're stopping photosynthesis. When you're doing photorespiration, you reduce it by 50%. You're also reducing photosynthesis in general by 50%. Because if you slow this down, you slow this down. They're linked. They're dependent on each other. So yes, these are not dependent on light. These can happen in the dark. They can also happen, they happen in the light as well. They need, however, the reactants, and they need to produce the products because the light reactions need the products. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah. All right. So when we say that that photosynthesis is decreased by 50%, I mean the whole process slows down by 50%. Okay. So the photorespiration is not good. What are plants going to do? Now we're talking about evolution. Luckily for us, plants evolved at a time over time. The temperature didn't get hotter all at once. The oxygen level on the planet did not increase all at once, right? So it happened over millions of years. So plants had time to evolve. They couldn't evolve rubisco. Rubisco did not change much at all. So it is what it is.
So what temperature make the...
That's a really good question. I'll get back to you on that, though, because I'm trying to focus on something else. But that's a very good point. It has to be hot. The hotter, the worse it is. All right? So deserts, forget about it. Nighttime is better. Yeah, because it's cooler, right? Excellent. Excellent, because that solves the problem. Wouldn't it be cool if you could do these light-independent reactions at night? Because then rubisco would only work at night when it's cooler, correct? Like in the desert, it gets cold at night. Rubisco would capture only CO2. Great. Great. There's a problem, though. Rubisco's there during the day, too. How do you stop it from capturing oxygen during the day and using up your precious resources, tying them all up? How do you stop it? There's an easy answer. There's two ways, actually. So let's go ahead and talk about this. There's two ways. So what we talked about so far is regular photosynthesis, something we call C3, the C3 pathway. you're producing a 3-carbon sugar, C3. So this is C3 pathway. That's normal, happens at the same time, right? You get the light, you break down the water, you produce the hydrogen, you get the ATP, you get the NADPH, you use it up, you capture the CO2, you make this, it just moving quick. At night, plants in the north, they're relaxing. They're recouping. They worked all day long, they're relaxing. Plants, we're in hot places like deserts, they don't want to do them both at the same time. When do they want to do the capturing of CO2? At night. But they got to do the light reactions at the daytime. So how do you do both? So there's 2 pathways. There's C4, and then you have CAM. Those are the 2 other ways we can do photosynthesis. And this has to do with evolution again and the environment. And so you find in the desert, the plants do it one way, and in places like the extremely hot rainforest, where there's a lot of rain, plants do another way. Desert plants have 2 problems. On a hot day, not only is it hot, it's also dry. So if they're not careful, they're going to lose cactus will lose all of its water, and what the little photosynthesis they can do will turn into photorespiration, and they'll die. I mean, they just won't survive. Plants that are not desert adapt will not survive unless we intervene with some technology. So where does it happen? What do desert plants do? Well, I'm going to break this up. I'm going to have, where is it? Oh man, I wish I could have had this in your hand. It would have made your life so much easier. Again, I printed this from Khan Academy. Khan Academy does a really great job. I'll post the article. And I'll try to get these organized for you. I was hoping it would be a little easier than this. Oh well. So what do desert plants do, and what do rainforest plants do? What do you think a desert plants can do? Desert plant has 2 problems. It's going to lose water during the day if it's not careful. And the second thing that's going to happen is desert plants can't do they'll do photorespiration. So what are they going to do?
What's the other name? Is it another photo thing?
There's CAM or C4. Those are the other two kinds of photosynthesis. What are desert plants going to do? Can anybody think about that and answer that question?
So do they want to produce more sugar? Like that was you for me?
Well, think about it. Just sit down and think about it. Why don't you guys talk about it, come up with a solution?
Can you ask the question
CO2, there's 2 problems here. When it gets hot, rubisco will choose oxygen instead of CO2. That's no good, right? You're going to lose half your photosynthesis. That's bad. She came up with the idea, why don't we just do it at night? Get the CO2 at night, because that's really a brilliant idea. And in fact, evolutionists has agreed with you. So, but the problem with your idea is that the light reactions need light. So they have to happen in the daytime. So and the other problem that you have is desert plants they're in a hot and dry environment. And if they're not careful, they're going to lose too much water. And there's not a lot of water for them to lose. Versus something like a rainforest where there's plenty of water. It doesn't matter if they lose water because it keeps on raining. But they don't have, it's still hot.
Do they get too much water, the plant in rainforest?
Can they get too much water? Not really, because there's so many plants. It's going to be hard for them to get too much water. It's very hard for plants to have too much water because of their cell walls, right? So go ahead and figure out a way. What would you do if you were nature and you were trying to come up with a way to separate the 2? What would to make this work with this new environment, this evolved time? Talk to each other. Come up with a plan. Pick groups of 3, 2 or 3, and come up with a plan. You can look it up if you like. You can talk to each other. But I want 2 plans.
It's 12.
What time is it?
12:40.
And when are we out of here?
12:42.
42 incidents.
All right, do that for homework then. Start now and do for homework. In 2 minutes, leave. There you go.
Can you give us a hint, please?
No. What are you going to solve? How do you solve the problem? Photosynthesis, the way it's done, the regular C3 photosynthesis has a problem. When it gets hot, it will choose oxygen and send CO2, and photosynthesis will decrease by 50%. That's a problem. Desert plants have the added problem that they can't lose too much water. So if you're in the Mexican desert, you're in the Arizonan desert, you're in the New Mexico desert, you're in the Saharan desert, you can't have plants that will lose too much water. What can these plants do to stop losing water and reduce the amount of photorespiration? You want to keep photorespiration down to a minimum. Obviously, the two answers are C4 and CAM. How and why? The answers to these questions are here. Once I have my 6th period kids organize this, you can come and get a copy after 6, which will be after your lunch. I would come and get them. They're easy answers. And I'll tell you what, tomorrow or Friday, the first thing you'll do is get a quiz on this. On Friday, the first thing you'll do is get a quiz on this question and this handout. So make sure you get the handout. All right, you may go 30 seconds early, but I can live with that. Turn the lights on, please. Yeah, I have to organize it first. Come back 6th period. After all that I said, what people get is, you have a handout? You three back there talking, you know you're distracting people, right? By people, I mean me.
I was just about to say that. You mean you.
Yeah.
So can I just take it out and then staple it?
Yeah, I have to organize them. There's blank sheets
they
in
not
there.
in order and all
I mean, they're in order, but I have to figure out where it printed weird. I don't know what's wrong with it.
So you gonna be in here 6th period?
Yes, I'll be here. In fact, Kay is gonna organize it.
Okay.
You're gonna do this first because this is important. We can do the AP class on Friday if we have to. Why you got hamburger stains on it? Ew, caca.
You're 5th period. You're gonna have to write on something. Is the answer to your question that they would say the stomata during the day?
One answer, yeah.
That's the camp.
You have to figure that out.
Well, I found this PowerPoint, and I wanted to ask if I can use this to take notes, because I like PowerPoint structures better. So can you go through it and see if it's like direct information?
And first of all, it is because that's from your Campbell. That's from your book.
Is
The
it?
same person who wrote your book wrote that.
So I can use these to take notes.
You understand you have a chapter reading.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
But I went through this, and I like the way that they
Oh, I love it. I love Campbell. I love his PowerPoints. In fact, the one I used in class yesterday was from Campbell.
Okay, so I had a question. What unit are we on? Because I found this in unit 6.
We're doing photosynthesis. That's all you got to worry about.
So we're
You
going
just said
around a bit.
We're jumping around.
Okay. Just
I'm
sure.
organizing the content based on the questions.
On the
Unit
test?
6 in this book
Uh-huh.
is not Unit 6 in AP Classroom. So AP class, do you not notice that the questions they ask you in AP Classroom are not the questions like they don't match up?
Right.
Because they don't do that because the questions are asked in a specific way. This particular topic is energy. The way the AP Classroom organizes it is this is energy processing.
So cellular respiration and
This is
photosynthesis.
connected with
Okay,
photosynthesis.
so I just use these because it's chapter 9 and chapter 10.
Yeah, in AP Classroom they're connected,
Okay.
and that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in some books they're separated.
Yeah.
What does this mean, keys? Is this some sign language that I missed?
That was my child,
Is that
like-
European?
I was on the
American sign
microphone.
language. She's using European sign language. That means keys. Give me keys.
Yeah.
So this is basically all that's in the chapter reading, but in PowerPoint, correct?
No,
No?
there's a lot of details they're missing out. Do you see the questions that I'm asking you to answer? Did you
Yes,
look
I
at it?
looked at it. I haven't started it yet, though.
Well, you're going to see that the questions are much deeper than that PowerPoint's going to give you. But it's a good beginning.
Okay.
See chlorophyll A and B, and there's the carotenoids.
See, if I do like notes at home and then you go over it in class, it makes sense in my head. Like
That's what I keep telling the kids. They don't listen though.
yesterday,
I
I
would-
did the notes on like what we were doing today, and it made sense in my head today.
That's right. So you should read the book, take notes, or PowerPoint, take notes, whatever you want
Okay,
to,
so-
and then come in and ask questions, participate, engage, and then you'll learn so much more. That's how learning happens, especially when you get to college and med school. If you do that, that's the number one thing you can do to be more successful. Read before you go to class. Then when you get to class, boom. If people would have read the chapter, done that assignment by yesterday, they would have came in today like, ooh.
No, I really thought it was due
I did
tonight,
half
so I
of it.
didn't start it.
I did half of it.
I'm all right.
sometime.
I'm all right. I'm good with whatever you guys do. I'm just trying to teach you guys what you need to do to be the maximum success.
I have a question. You said you were gonna send out the PowerPoint from yesterday. Is it possible you can send it out today? The one you were using yesterday.
Yeah, let me do that. Could you send me that one? I'll send you both. You guys
Yeah.
can do whatever you want.
I was taking notes on it. I never finished.
You want me to email it to you?
Yeah, that'll be the best.
Which one? Like
Time or one.
that one?
Yeah, that's fine.
No, it can't. It can't.
Oh, this thing doesn't work. I have to use my computer.
It's not time 01.
Thank you.
You better